Okay, it's here. And the title of the presentation is Assessing Schema.org's Coverage of Terms from Key Biomedical Datasets.
All right, thank you, Robert. Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph, and I'm a software developer working at the Stanford Center for Biomedical Informatics in Mark's Musen Lab. And today I'm going to present a method to assessing Schema.org's coverage of terms from key biomedical datasets. And also, hopefully at the end of the presentations, I can convince you, you start annotating your data using Schema.org. This study, I conduct this study together with my co-author, Kudi Budli from Maastricht University, and who unfortunately he couldn't be with us today. Okay, so let's start with some background. So what is Schema.org? Well, Schema.org is a project initially initiated by Google and other major web search engines to promote structured, machine-readable data on the web. Schema.org itself is basically a collection of schemas for describing things on the web using a common vocabulary. So this picture here is to illustrate what Schema.org is. So you can see on the left-hand side you have a website. This is about like a pancake recipe. And then on the right-hand side you have the Schema.org markups, which give you the structured information about that recipe. So one important thing about Schema.org is that this structured data is embedded inside your HTML page. And the idea is by having these markups, any software agents can extract the data and you can do like data explorations or data extraction. So schema for biomedical domain. In mid-2016, Schema.org has a new family member called the Health Lifecycle Extensions, which introduced many new types and properties to describe biomedical entities, such as conditions, studies, causes, therapies, medical literatures, and so on. If we look at the data statistics from the Web Data Commons in 2017, we found that more than 2.6 million websites make use of these extensions. And it's only like around 100,000 of the sites make use of extensions to describe biomedical datasets. It is surprising because the web has tons of biomedical datasets. For example, drug banks has more than 10,000 drug entries. ClinicalTrials.gov has more than 250,000 of clinical trial records. PubMed has 28 million citations about biomedical literature, but none of them has Schema.org markups. So the motivation is, it is thought that if we could add Schema.org markups at each of the page in the biomedical repository sites, it will enhance the data discoverability and utility. Why? Because again, refer to the first slide, having Schema.org markup will enable like say a software agents to make use and to extract your data and to have more interesting applications using that. So our research is like, we then questions like, okay, then how good is the extensions handling this biomedical metadata and data set? And how can we do the assessments and to measure it? So the goal is we would like to provide this sort of method for data providers to do the assessment and then make an informed decisions whether or not they should implement Schema.org on their website. So our case study, we take these three types, medical trial, drug, and general data sets. And the idea is we do a comparisons with a known biomedical data standards. As you can see on the right hand side of the table. So you can see like for medical trial, we use the US regulation rule for clinical trials registrations, CFR Title 42, drug, we have drug bank, and then the VA national drug file. And for the data set, we compare it with bioschemas dataset, the BioCaddy DATS model, and the W3C HLS dataset. So this is the workflow. Basically, what we do a manual inspections, finding similarities between fields. So we check at the field name and the field descriptions. And two important things here, we also take into account the requirement for filling in the fields, such that, like using this keyword, the must, the should, and the optional. And the other important point is we also need to decide the matching quality. So how on deciding the matching quality? If there's no matching field, then we categorize it as no match. It's pretty straightforward. Otherwise, if there's a matching, we then look at the field's value type, and then we do this assessment using this table. We categorize there are two types of data. One is the object type, and one is primitive type. So the idea is the object type, it's like you have a person's address, a condition, so on. And then the primitive type is whether it's just a plain text, a date, or a number. And this is, again, like very quite straightforward. If you find like a mismatch between the value type, then it's a partial match, we call it. And then if they're same, otherwise, it's an exact match. So there's a note for the primitive type. If you have access to the data of the data specifications, you can dig more deeper. You can do more inspections such that you want to see whether there's a value mismatch. For example, in a name field, if a name field carries a full name versus a field name that carries only the first name, we will categorize it as a primitive match instead. So in the next slide, these next three slides, I'm going to give you an example of how we do the assessment. So the first is we have this, so we match the title from the data tag suite on the left hand with a name from schema.org. And we could make it this matching because the descriptions is similar, although the labelings are different. And then we categorize the quality of the mapping as an exact match because we see that both are using string as the value type. The other examples, we have identifiers. They are both sharing the same name and also descriptions. We found similarities. But if you look at the value type for the identifier for the data tag suite, it uses like an object, and it called like identifiers informations. And the schema.org just uses a plain text. So in this case, we categorize it as a partial match. Also, like with the partial match, we have a score of 0.5. I forgot to say also for exact match, we use a matching score of 1. And in this slide, this is just to say that we ignore cardinality, which is the number of items for your value. So we do not care about it. We just care about to see the similarities from the field name, the descriptions, and the value type. And in this case, you can see like distributions versus distribution. So there's a plural and singular there. We don't look at the cardinality, and then for the matching quality, it's an exact match because both using an object type, and it's score 1. So after we doing this process and we collect all these data points, what we do is we just apply these two measurements, namely the coverage ratio and the compatibility rating. It's pretty straightforward. The coverage ratio is just to count how many matching divided by the specification size. For example, we have, in this toy example, we have 5 exact matches, 5 partial matches, and then 10 no matches at the end of this assessment. And then the coverage ratio equals to 5 plus 5 divided 20, so it's 0.5. And then for the compatibility rating, we adopt this prioritized aggregations model. So this is the implementation form of the model, where M is just in the average score, the average matching score for different requirement level. And again, like we have a toy example here, assume that we have a average matching score, 0.6 for the must field, 0.8 for the should field, and 0.4 for optional fields, then the compatibility rating will be 0.424. So we apply this measurement to all our mapping tables. So at the end, we have 8 mapping tables based on the specifications that we compared on the previous slide. And this is what we have. So, this chart for us, this is the summary of our results. So on the left-hand side, you have the compatibility rating, and on the right-hand side, you have the coverage ratio. The idea is the longer the bar, the better. And this is sort of like information that we would like to provide to data providers to see that how well is schema.org can be applied to their data specifications. As you can see, like at the top you have the bioschemas data set. So it has like a full, complete, a perfect score for compatibility rating and the coverage ratio. It's not surprising because bioschemas works together with schema.org. At the bottom, we have this medical trial schema vocabulary compared to CFR. And we have the lowest because we found that actually the schema vocabulary in medical trials is not as detailed as the CFR standard. And maybe one is interesting is for the data set schema vocabulary compared to DATS model. As you can see, there's a low number for the compatibility rating, but it has a relatively high in the coverage ratio. So the interpretation is for the data set, for the schema vocabulary compared to DATS, it covers almost half of the DATS model, but apparently there are many value type mismatch, and therefore it's not really well compatible. Okay, I will just skip this slide because basically it's just a text to describe these results, which you can read if you download this slide. Because I want to go into here because this is the most interesting, in my opinion. So in schema.org, especially at extensions, you can have an ontology terms as a data field value. So the extension here, they introduce so-called the code properties, where you can add an ontology term for about your content. And the way you can implement this here, like show here, is like you can use this automated service, for example, provided by BioPortal. We call it this reconciliation service. So given a label, so imagine your content has a label, a biomedical label, using this reconciliation service, you can get the ontology term for that label. So in this case, we have a code from mesh, and then that's the class RI, which is represented as the URL. So imagine that with this code feature, you could have like you can link together, or you can relate your data with other data that use similar approach using this code. So I will wrap up the presentations by saying some take-home messages. The first is we found this various results for the schemas in the extensions for handling biomedical metadata and datasets. And overall, we found that the schema works best for datasets, moderately well for the drugs, and minimally for the clinical trials. We also have provided this methodology to assess the completeness and the accuracy of the schemas in the extensions. And we also believe that, the method can be generalized to any schemas in schema.org and also to any other data specifications. If you're interested, I have the Excel spreadsheet that contains, that we embed the formula in that Excel spreadsheet. So you just put the field names, and then you do the assessments, and then you will get a score. So at the end, you will know if you're going to do a schema.org markup, you can use this as your measurement. Yeah, so before I end, so this I will acknowledge these people, and also this is part of the CEDAR project at Stanford. And yeah, please visit my poster 562. I have like demo applications for this reconciliation service, as well as the applications that use schema.org data. I hope this is useful for you, and thank you.
Thank you. We have time for questions, please.
Hi, this is very interesting. Could you compare the schema.org with the original visions of semantic web? It sounds like they might be able to converge down the road. So that's one question. Another one is, could you give a few examples about what the applications for schema.org might be? Let's say all the web pages are marked up with the schema.org stamp.
Right.
Now, what could we do with them?
Right. So for the first one, so what's the other
Semantic
website?
web.
Semantic
the original
web?
vision of semantic web. The idea is we can code all this stuff with ontologies, then we can do all these intelligent searches, instead of, so we know the semantics instead of somebody delivering a web page.
Right. Okay. I think it has a good align. So for example, Google used schema.org to enhance its indexing. Now, like if you ask Google to differentiate between your keywords, Google is able to do that because Google knows like what's the term. Is it an animal? Is it a plant, or is it a car? So in one extent, it contains a semantic meaning because all these types and also these properties, and also uses this common vocabulary. So that's the answer for number one. And for the second, I'm sorry, I missed the second question.
Let's say the schema.org is
the
adopted
applications.
throughout.
Right.
Give a few examples of the applications.
Well, the applications, one is for indexing and for searching, but the other thing that I have is my vision. It's like, I imagine actually a web database. So if all web page on the internet, on the web, has this markup, this data markup, and it's based on common vocabulary, and then you can use terminology, what you can do is you can query the internet by deploying your software agents. So it's kind of bridge all these data integrations problem. The idea is you can get the same information from multiple websites, and then you combine them together without any problem. And of course, you see, like with the code, this biomedical code, what you can do is you can also link this different data from different sources on different websites, as simple as, it uses the same URL, it uses the same class IRI from the ontology. So that's what I kind of envision, by having this schema.org markup. All right.
We have time for some more questions.
I know you said you use Bio-Caddy, and I know that's related with BD2K,
Right.
but I also know that in CEDAR there are templates for metadata for a lot of these experiments that were run for BD2K. So what, did you do anything with those, or they're just there and they're not going to be touched for another decade?
Okay, yeah. Actually, this is part of CEDAR project. So actually, for those who don't know what is CEDAR, CEDAR is another project at Stanford for metadata authoring, which means that you create a form and then you fill with this form your metadata, your data, and then we have this bunch of cool features there. With respect to schema.org, you can annotate actually the field. So when you create a form, when you create a template, you will add a field, right? Basically, a field is just a questions for your investigations. You could annotate that questions using a schema.org property name.
But I guess what I meant was, are you aligning these? Are you taking the aligning these, or are you
Yes.
What are you doing? Are you,
Oh.
because, you know, we can create metadata all day long. If we're not using it, it doesn't mean anything, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But there's a unique thing about schema.org, in my opinion, is that, you know, because it's a web standard, so it's different than.
All the more reason you should be taking the lead on,
Yes.
you know, aligning that standard with this standard. Or, you know.
Okay, but CEDAR is not a standard. It's
It's
a.
not, but the metadata created for the project was supposedly the standard. Or
Right.
you know,
Yes.
CEDAR is not, but the
So-
metadata created by the expert were supposedly.
Oh, a standard.
So
yes.
this is getting a little bit technical. I would suggest to do this over lunch or over the poster session.
Oh, yes.
So which we will have just after this. Are there any more somewhat general questions? If not, then please let's thank our speaker again.
Right. Thank you, everyone.